Guys, welcome back to the show. Today with me, I have Vincentian lawyer currently in New York, residing in New York actually. His name is Chevanev Charles, and I'll let him introduce himself to you, a brief summary, and then we'll get right into that interview. We got so much information for you because, guys, you've been asking me questions about visas, green cards. Briefly, tell me about yourself.
Okay, so I am a son of the soil, that son of Maxwell and Doris Childs. I was educated in London. I spent about 6 years of my professional life in St. Vincent. Moved to the United States back in 2022. I got married, so I moved over here
Right.
for love.
That's good.
I ended up passing the bar,
Right.
and I practice one of my primary practice areas is immigration law.
So let's begin. What's happening currently now with green card holders if they're detained at airports? Because that's some of the questions that subscribers sent to me to be asked.
Yeah. So right now, there's a lot of misinformation and fear going around when it
Hmm.
comes surrounding the ability of a green card holder to come back to the United States.
Correct. Okay.
You do have the right to re-enter
Hmm.
unless you have done something that gives them the impression that you've abandoned your residency
Wow.
or you've committed a crime.
Hmm.
So a serious crime at that.
Right.
So for the authorities to think that you've abandoned your residency, you have to have stayed out for longer than 6 months. So I
Okay.
always tell my clients 6 months is okay, but you see, once you pass the 6 month mark, you're going to have to start explaining why you would
Oh.
have left the United States. So I always recommend if you're going to stay out longer than 6 months to a year, you try to get a reentry permit, or you just take the risk. You at least document why you've left and why you're eligible to return. So things like your rental agreement with your property here,
Hmm.
or if you do own a property, you would walk with a document that is hopefully notarized.
Right.
Uh, you would have essentially things to establish that you intend to return here. Even a vacation letter is fine as well.
Hmm.
But the authorities are looking for any reason right now to turn people back home because they want to instill fear because they need to lessen the number of individuals who are coming to the United
Wow.
States.
So the next thing would be what kind of questions would someone or a visitor or a green card holder expect from when they land at the border there?
So a green card holder would get, well, they can ask you pretty much anything,
Right.
but you can refuse to answer certain things.
Okay.
So for a green card holder, you have to confirm your identity and your status.
Hmm.
But beyond that, you can basically remain silent, but there are consequences to remaining silent. The authorities are essentially asking legitimate questions, in most cases, um, trying to ascertain whether or not you're a threat to the United States.
Hmm.
So once they ascertain that you are a threat or that you're being very vague about your answers, then they can subject you to something called uh, secondary inspection. And secondary inspection is when they can hold you up for hours at end. If you're a first time visitor to the United States on a green card, like say you just got approved with your spouse, you're going to get that. I had that. You're going to get that inspection, secondary inspection. So they're going to come and ask you a few questions. They're going to do their checks, make sure that your medical form is in order, etc. But right now, I find that a lot of green card holders are being subject to secondary inspection
Wow.
because of how long they've spent outside of the US. Right.
But
So
is there, mhm, go ahead.
go ahead.
Is there a specific time you should spend outside of the U.S. as a green card holder?
6 months or less,
6 months
definitely.
or less. 6 months or
Yeah.
less. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And to be honest, right now, there are actually other attorney colleagues of mine that are actually recommending not to travel, even though you have a green card. If you can put off the travel till
Yeah.
maybe the next few months,
Hmm.
because we want Mr. the administration to sort of settle,
Okay.
and because there's a lot of back and forth right now.
So, in terms of the sponsorship financial requirements for green card holders,
Yeah.
what is it that they should know not right now?
Let's say you're bringing a family over from St. Vincent, right? So
Right.
you have a spouse, and you're a U.S. citizen or a green card holder, and you apply for your spouse to come over. You're going to sign something called an I-864, and
Hmm.
that I-864 is basically going to demonstrate to the United States that you promise to take care of the person
Correct.
once they get here.
Hmm.
So if they end up becoming a public charge, having to be put in housing, medical care, etc., the government can actually sue you to make contributions to that. Now, you need to be making a particular level of income. So, for a household of two, I believe it's around $33,000. That's approximation. It changes every year. So it's around $33,000 that you would have to be making, because you have to be making at least 125% of the HHA guidelines, which is the poverty guidelines. So
Mhm.
you have to be making a bit of money to be able to support your, and then, naturally that
Yeah,
would be the,
yeah.
you'd expect that when you're coming to a new country that you're able to support yourself, and the government doesn't want you to become a public charge, and then they end up
Oh,
responsible
good.
for you. And there's a very
Uh,
useful link.
mhm.
If you just type in I-864 affidavit of sponsorship, you will see a list in the 48 contiguous states setting out the guidelines as to how much money you need to be
Okay.
making.
What are the options really if the person's green card application is denied? What are the options they have?
Okay, so if someone's green card is denied, there's a couple things you can do.
Mhm.
First, you have to understand why it was denied.
Right.
If it was denied for some criminal offense, or
Mhm.
if it was denied because of an incomplete aspect and you did not respond to the RFE, then you can just reapply again. I find in reapplying, a lot of individuals tend to have not have consulted an attorney initially,
Wow.
and they end up putting something on their application that sometimes is not conducive to an approval. So when you end up having an application before a USCIS officer who is analyzing hundreds of these things every week, sometimes on a daily basis, they will look for, as soon as they see a problem, it's RFE. We need more information about that, and they send you back to a pilot and can and delay your application for months.
Wow. A big. We've been seeing in the news a lot about people being deported, even with green cards. What does a green card really entail? Does
So
it
a
make
green card makes you a lawful permanent resident, and that is
perfect?
renewable. But it has limits, and
Okay.
it also has terms. You cannot commit certain criminal offenses and expect to, maintain your green card. If you
Right.
spend more than a year outside of the United States, or do anything inconsistent with the terms and conditions of your green card, then you can get deported. And your green card can be taken by an immigration judge. Only an immigration judge can take your green card.
Immigration judge.
And they essentially give you an opportunity to explain yourself.
Right.
But what I'm seeing now, there was a gentleman by the name of, I think it's Kilmar Garcia.
Right.
His case is right now, it's in the news.
Yep.
And right now he had a valid green card.
Mhm.
They detained him and they said he was a member of a particular gang, and they deported him. And right now they're trying to get him back into the United States. So it kind of tells you that nobody is really safe, quote unquote,
Nobody's safe.
despite having the green card. So if you have worries about your green card right now, you should check the doctor early, as they say. Consult
Wait,
an immigration attorney for sure.
right. So there's another question I got from some of the subscribers about student visas now.
Mhm.
What are the actions that students should take when they're in the U.S. now? Because we're
I,
seeing
I
students
yeah,
intern.
I think the actions actually start before you get to the United
Mhm.
States.
Right.
So if you are a student intend on studying here,
Hmm.
I don't think it's a good idea for you to be posting things on social media, because they do check these things
Okay.
on social media that is inconsistent with what the United States represents. So if
Okay.
you criticize their allies, if you criticize, it's probably not a good idea to do that. Yes, there's a whole argument about freedom of speech,
Yeah.
but there are consequences that they're now imposing on students now, because I've seen student visas revoked,
Yep.
students detained and deported, and I find that they target you based on what you're saying, right? Not just before you come into the United States, but also while you're here. So if you're on campus right now and someone invites you to a rally, then you have to weigh the consequences very carefully, right? Are you able to withstand a revocation? What is that going to mean for your career? Right. So if, of course, if you're fine with that, then go ahead, protest. It's your right.
Right.
But also be reminded that these things do have
The
consequences.
consequences. Okay. In terms of persons now, I hear, I'm seeing the news. People are saying I always have to walk with my ID card. I always have to walk with my passport because I'm fearful. Should people always be carrying around the immigration documents?
Now, I would say yes.
Mhm, mhm,
Right now, I would say yes. The reason I say that is because an encounter with ICE
mhm.
can quickly go south if you don't have the right documentation to
Okay,
support what you're saying.
right.
Never claim to be a U.S. citizen when you're not, because while that may not be necessarily grounds for deportation, that is definitely grounds for a future denial of your application. If you've ever claimed to be a U.S. citizen, that is story done for you, as
Wow.
we say. So carry your documents. Maybe a digital copy is fine.
Mhm,
If you have a green card, keep it on you.
mhm.
If you have a passport with a valid visa in there, keep that on you as well, because you need to be able to tell ICE that, hey, I'm not really involved in whatever you're trying to do, because a lot of arrests are happening collaterally. So they target someone else, and you happen to be there, and they pick you up and they ask you some questions you can't necessarily answer,
And you.
and then you get detained.
Wow. So, in terms of persons who are filing taxes,
Yeah.
um, and the question is, can ICE track me down through that too? I mean,
Mhm.
and even if you're filing taxes, is it that going to give you a
Okay, so
pathway,
filing
or that?
taxes
Mhm.
does not confer on you an immigration benefit.
Okay.
However,
Mhm.
it does help you establish something called good moral character,
Okay.
right? So that you can use that in the event, because there's some immigration benefits in their requirements. Good moral character is one, and under a subsection of that, you have uh, I've been filing taxes since I've been here, right?
Okay.
Now, that said, you can, even though you're undocumented, you can get something called an individual tax ID number,
Mhm.
and you can still file taxes.
Right.
There is a privacy law between the IRS and ICE at the moment that says they can't communicate.
Right.
But I have seen some chatter that says that they're working out a deal right now
Mhm.
to try to see how they can circumvent that.
Oh.
So once they're able to do that, then that is going to be a serious problem for a lot of undocumented individuals in this country, because not only will they be able to find your address,
Mhm.
but even U.S. citizens who claim you as a dependent would reveal their addresses, and then they will know where to find you. So that I suspect is going to be a significant problem if, in fact, they end up getting to do what they want to do.
Wow. But so then the question is, how do you know when it's time to consult an immigration attorney?
If you
Is it all?
feel that there's a problem, I
Mhm.
would say yes. If you want to double check
Yeah.
that your position is as solid as you think it is,
Mhm.
then I would say consult.
Yeah.
There are a lot of immigration attorneys who offer free 15, 20-minute
Correct.
consultations, and that does not, it's 15 minutes of your time, which can save you a big headache later on. I would also say look online. Some of these immigration attorneys are now putting out a lot of videos. I have to slap back mine. Uh,
Right.
and there's a lot of valuable information you can get. I have a one I follow right now, which is McBean Immigration Law, and of course I have my Legal Lantern channel as well,
Mhm.
that I will be posting things on. And I find the ones who don't look at what's happening in the news,
Mhm.
and just because you have a green card, you feel that you can just waltz up after a year or two, you're going to find yourself in a bit of a trouble there. So I think check the doctor before you head to the United States. At least do some research of your own,
Mhm.
and just to make sure that your position is as solid as you think it is.
Um, is it still possible to apply for asylum based on the recent changes that have been made in the United States? Because a lot of people have left the Caribbean and they apply for asylum for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah,
Some they get through, some they get turned down. But is it still possible to do it
yeah,
asylum?
absolutely, absolutely. You can still apply for asylum. Whether or not you'll be approved is another situation.
Hmm.
So you have to make sure that your evidence is solid, because you have to have essentially a a well evidenced, I would say, fear of persecution,
Okay.
because a lot of these cases are riddled with people make things up, of course, and
Yeah.
they show up to the interview and they find um, that the USCIS officer does not believe them.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are ended up. I have two clients right now. They ended up filing asylum defensively, which is they were picked up by ICE,
Yeah.
and they don't want to get deported, so they say, "I don't want to go back to my country because of X, Y, Z."
Mhm.
Now, those individuals, they have a well documented reason for not going back home. So the United
Right.
Nations has country reports, knowing that individuals of their particular class
Yeah.
and characteristics are persecuted where they come from.
Mhm.
But if you come from the Caribbean, that's going to be a little bit more difficult.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have a police report, let's say your husband's beating you, he's a member of the police force, he's high up or something, you need to be able to show that if you go back to St. Vincent or wherever it is you're coming from,
Right.
okay, why didn't you move to another part of the country? Or did you report it to the authorities? Did you go to another island? What was the trajectory? Why didn't you go to Canada or to some other place other than the United States? What makes us so special, essentially?
Wow.
And you will have you have a high standard to prove, but it's much less than the other avenues that individuals tend to seek. So you have it's about 10% likelihood of harm that you have to prove.
Okay. Now, turn attention to persons with visas, tourist visas, we call them, right? What are the consequences now for overstaying those visas?
Okay, so if you overstay a visa,
Mhm.
consequences you can get permanently banned. It depends on how long you overstay.
Right.
If you are working as well, also an issue, because what tends to happen is you come to the United States on a 6 month visa,
Mhm.
you work for a little bit, then you go back. But
Right.
sometimes, for whatever reason, you get stuck here. The
Mhm.
minute you begin to accrue unlawful presence, certain bans start to apply.
Wow.
Anything past 180 days, it's a 10-year ban. That all of that is waived though if you get married to a U.S. citizen. All
Oh.
right, or you find I always tell people always have a backup plan.
Mhm.
Right, so whether it is you're going to get a job, you apply for an extension, do
Right.
something, have some sort of application pending, so that you're just not found just out of status and accruing unlawful presence, because that is deportation and a ban right there. Because once they deport you, it's going to be very difficult to come back to the United
Um,
States.
is there any special, I would say, immigration rules that are applying to Caribbean residents now different than anybody else, or it's just whatever is happening now is just worldwide? It's for everybody. Is there any special thing going on?
No, not to the
Okay.
Caribbean, I would say
Okay.
specifically, because
Okay.
I have clients as far as Azerbaijan.
Okay.
Yeah, weird country, but you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
still a very lovely client. And they actually pose a very similar question. And what I would always say, it's the standards that you show up at the border is normally what you're going to find for almost everyone.
Yeah.
But there are certain countries that you will get more scrutiny with.
Uh,
A lot of the Caribbean islands, I don't think you would necessarily fall under that.
mhm.
There is I believe there's some islands that are on a yellow list at the minute,
Yeah.
and you would essentially have more scrutiny,
Mhm.
right? Because what they're looking at is uh, how easy it is for somebody to get a visa in your country, and then now
Right.
you're showing up in mine, right? So when they see that your country doesn't have very high standards,
Mhm.
they're going to put you on that particular list.
I got you.
Until that is worked out, expect a lot more questions when you show up at the border.
Wow. Okay. In terms of inspection, in terms of your status, is there any way to adjust the status if you enter the United States without inspection?
Okay,
Yeah.
so that is a class called EWI, right? As you say in legal terms, that's entry without inspection.
Right.
When you enter without inspection, you did not see an immigration officer,
Mhm.
and that means that it is extremely difficult for you to change your status, even if you get married to a U.S. citizen,
Wow.
right? So that doesn't necessarily help you. So for entry without inspection, there are a couple ways to change your status.
Hmm.
One of them is the 245I, which is if somebody applied for you back before, uh, I believe it's April 2001,
Hmm.
you may be able to be grandfathered into the system.
Okay.
There's also, I believe, VAWA, and also, which is Violence Against Women's Act. and also the VAWA and forgive me, my mind slips me. Military parole in place. That's it.
Okay.
So if you have like a son, you came here without inspection. You have a son who's now a military officer. They can apply for you once they are over the age of 21, and you can get military parole in place, which takes care of the IWI, and then you're eligible to then apply for an immigration benefit. But
That's interesting.
apart from that, it's next to impossible to
Possible.
so always see an immigration officer. So make sure you get your visa, you come here, and then your first act cannot be illegal.
All right.
So
Got you. Got you. Well, this is a good lesson this morning for all of the viewers, and I know they would enjoy it, and may have more questions. So we'd have to come back a second time, I believe.
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
I'm gonna leave a link in the description for your website, contacts, so that if they need to get into contact with you, if in New York or England,
Absolutely.
wherever they are,
Yeah.
they could get in contact with you for that consultation
I
and
would
more.
I would have loved to go into some more detail with some of the things, but time.
Yeah, yeah.
Nevertheless, I would say that it is always important to consult an immigration attorney because
Mhm.
sometimes you think that your case is XYZ. It may not be as weak as you think, and sometimes it may not be as strong as you think.
Yeah.
So it's important to get a consult on the books. Okay. And apart from that, do be safe out there. And thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.